Hi, I'm David Poe. Welcome to the channel today. We're going to be working on an 11 by 14 panel. I've already stained it with a combination of cad yellow light as well as a little hint of the cad red light to create this orange that you see. And that panel has dried entirely, left to dry for several days. The photo reference is on the iPad. This is just a common scene, a little road that gets us into the painting, as you see, and then it has some trees on either side of that road, which help us give a nice O pattern in terms of keeping the viewer inside of the painting, because both of the trees act to funnel our attention down the road to the focal point, which is the end of that road where we see some sky peeking in underneath some of the trees. There's a little bit of mystery there as to where the road ends and how we're seeing some of that sky color next to the darkest dark, which is that grouping of trees that sits back a little ways from the foreground. Using a half box easel today. This is a very cheap easel, but I like it, so we're going to use it. And I'm putting the paint out on my palette. I'll show you the colors and talk about those in just a second. You may be wondering, so why did I go back to a half box easel when I had the art box and panel set up? Well, one thing that I have realized is that the half box easel is sturdy enough that I can paint anything on it. Large, small panels, pretty much anything at all. When I tried to do some 16 by 20s at the latest Augusta Plein Air Festival, I had to basically hold the panel on my art box and panel easel setup in order to paint, because the panel was just too big. It was flopping around too much on the tripod, and obviously I didn't care for that. So in order for me to go a little bit bigger, and I think at this point in time I want to do more experimentation with larger panels, it behooves me to stick with that setup when I found that there was just too much bounce on the panel, and trying to put a lot of paint down was very, very challenging. So the easel provides a different method. Okay, let's go over the colors briefly. I'm going to show those to you here in a second on the video. I think I'll hold them up. There we go. I've got burnt sienna, yellow ochre, ivory black. We've got madder lake, which is a Rembrandt color, cad yellow light, phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, titanium white, and then some Galkid gel from Gamblin. I'm also using Gamsol mineral spirits. I'm using hog bristle brushes, 2468, and that's from Utrecht. It's their 208 line. I'm also using one liner brush. That's a Princeton liner brush, number 2. And I also am using some gloves today, trying to become less messy, especially painting at home in my studio. So the other thing I like about the half box easel, to get back to that subject, is the fact that it essentially is, of course, a studio that can move outdoors, and it is a wonderful, wonderful setup for a small space if you are limited, like I am currently, in your home with setting up a studio. So here I can pretty much paint just about any size I want, and I'm going to have a sturdy setup, and I can also, it's light enough that I can take it outside. The other thing I like about it is that it will store all the paintbrushes. The small 37, 40 milliliter tubes will fit into it nicely. It comes with a half-size palette. I actually like that better than some models where it folds and then it turns into a larger palette. I have trouble sometimes with the paint getting, or if there's windy conditions or something, with some of those palettes that fold. So this comes with a palette that actually doesn't fold. It just serves kind of as a base for me. This palette, by the way, is actually a full palette. It does not belong to the French easel that I'm using, but I'm using it today in the studio because it gives me more mixing space and a little bit more of a surface to show you how I'm mixing my colors. So with the tone canvas, now we're not going to have to deal with any white poking through the colors. So I go back and forth on which type I like to do. Sometimes I like just to leave a white canvas and paint over it. Other times I like to tone a canvas like this, make sure it's well dry before using it, so that I make sure I can come in even with lighter colors and totally cover that up if I wish to. I'm sketching in with burnt sienna and just the big shapes, looking at those tree formations in the foreground that kind of set the mood and the tone, and getting the viewer to go into that, what I call an O composition or a circle composition, because it's all within the four corners that I'm trying to get your attention, with the road, like I said, and then the dark and the lightest light being just a little off center there. So I don't have to be precise. I'm using, I think it's a number 2 or a number 4 flat brush at this point in time to sketch this in with. Another point to make would be that notice how sloppy this looks at this point. There's no need to try to get detail. And in fact, I've been told, and I appreciate artists that are not trying to be so particular. Nature doesn't look like a building. And so when our strokes are looser and less thought about, I think that can provide a tremendously nice variety in our painting. People have called those happy accidents. I suppose that's one way to look at it. I'm also working in this painting today at putting down the color as fast, as quickly as I possibly can. So even though I'm showing you every stroke today, this painting only took just an hour. I didn't edit it at all. So here I'm making my medium green mixture at this point. I will darken this up a little bit more with that ultramarine blue. Always spend some time trying to get the colors right on your palette before you put it up on your panel. I think that's helpful, especially if you're a beginner. So here I'm now going in to parts of the painting where I'm seeing the darkest darks. Now, of course, you may notice, well, the image on the iPad is much darker. Well, yes, but it's a photograph, and photographs tend to distort reality. And I was actually at the scene, so I know that was not quite as dark as what we see in that photo result. Remember that your darkest darks tend to be too dark in a photo, and your lightest lights tend to be too light in a photo. So don't use the colors on your iPad or your reference photo as a way of matching colors. Trust your memory, or maybe even make an even a little small panel painting study to key your colors and then bring it into the studio. I know a lot of artists that use maybe a 6x8 or a 5x7 and work on those panels outdoors just to get the big shapes and the colors right and the composition right. And then they'll come back into the studio and use those simple studies from the outdoors to create whatever size painting they wish, as long as it's size related. same size ratio, like 1 to 2 and so forth, then you can easily prepare a grid and make the painting larger. Now here, as I'm putting in this first base color, I'm looking everywhere in this painting for that color. So I'm going to paint as much of that green that I see right now, which will save me time and will help cover the canvas, which is the first goal, is to get all the big shapes colored. And then we can go back and do some of our adjustments as needed. So I'm not really thinking too much about what strokes I'm making, just trying to get it covered as quickly as possible. The one thing I am thinking about is that this is on the vertical plane. These are vertical trees, and so I'm trying to emulate that with strokes that are also vertical. And then when I do my detail work, as you can see, most of them going straight up and down. I will go more horizontal with some of the additional brushwork of highlights. Now here I'm lighting the mixture. I'm putting some Galkid gel into there. Added some cad yellow light. That's all I did, was add that to the same existing pile of color. That's the best way to work within those puddles. It's easier for you to see the difference of the colors. Is it what you want? It's still the same value, it's just a different shade of green. So if you squint right now, you will see that those two colors blend together, and that's what I mean by the tonal value is virtually the same, even though the color shifted a little bit. If you have one of those scales, the gray scale, I guess you would be talking about a value probably around the value 2 or 1 even, in terms of the darkness of the color. Okay. Now on that one side there's a lot more sky holes. Now I'm not going to stay faithful to those trees. I didn't really care too much for those trees, but I do want the feeling of those trees. So I'm going to put some green down, but I'm also leaving space for that underpainting, that tonal value to show through, the orange at this point. And I'm going to come back in later on, and when I do the sky, and put the sky holes in, which are quite numerous for that side of the painting. So I'm intentionally seeing what the end result of the painting is in my head while I'm painting this. It's a process that one way to think about it would be layers. In fact, I saw a YouTube video not too long ago in which someone was painting a mural, and so they had all these cutouts, right, for the different colors, and they were using spray paint, and they would go next to the building, put one color down with different shapes, and then they would come back over top of it after it had dried with spray paint, another color, another list of shapes to create the image that they were making. So they were layering, basically, right? One color on top of another or next to another with time in between. So what we are essentially doing is layers as well. Going in with a darker layer, creating a little bit more color closer up in the foreground in this layer. So, we got that undertone that we're using, and now we're going over top of it with this fresh paint. And then even after I get it all covered, basically the areas are being covered with just one color hue at this point in time. Then after that layer is done and the whole canvas is covered, we're going to come back over top of that with our final details and color shifting and some branches and so forth. I always leave the branches for about the last, because they're the darkest color really in any of my paintings. And this way I I know that even if I mess up, I can come over top even again with a palette knife is a wonderful tool. And sometimes I will take some color and put it over top of some of the portions of the basic tree branches that we see. But if I try to paint around a tree branch or a trunk of a tree, it it makes the painting look like it is a paint by number. Maybe you've tried that, and especially if you're a beginner painter, you're like, how do I make my trunks? When you might think, well, we start with the darks, so why don't I just put the trunks in right now? And then later on, as you paint, you discover, oh, why do I have these trunks? Plus, you're committing yourself to these trunks right away. Sometimes I like to vary what I'm going to do with those trunks as I see these abstract leaf colors that we're basically putting on the canvas right now and trying to make them look like they make sense, right? It makes sense that if there's a bunch of tree branches going to nowhere, well, that doesn't make any sense. You want them to coordinate so that you can sense that, oh, okay, these leaves, which are just abstract greens, right, shapes, are connected to the branches, and making sure that the branches are going to where those darker shades are. And it also allows you the opportunity then to see, I don't want to put in any more branches than I need to tell the story of the painting. Now here, I've mixed phthalo blue with the titanium white to produce the lightest blue that I see, which is by the horizon line. So you see that photo reference there, and you see pretty much where that horizon line is. I'm forming it now by painting into the earlier green. And of course, if you squint, you will notice that obviously this is a different value than those greens. It is in fact the lightest value of the painting. It's going on right here closest to the horizon. And I'm going to put a few sky holes in here too to create that interest at the very edge of that road. So you'll see me eventually, I'll put a couple of dots over top of the greens that I already laid. So once again, sometimes it's a series, right, of layering. And that's why you always want to start thin with your paint mixtures. Use more of the Gamsol, and then in subsequent layers, use more of the paint right out of the tube that you're mixing on your palette, of course, to go in over top of. So here I'm trying to not necessarily paint exactly what I'm seeing here, but to give you the feel of the space back there at the end of the road where there's some mystery going on because we see some sky holes. So there's something drawing us to this spot where right now even we have the darkest darks, and then those sky holes are really functioning as our lightest lights. There's actually, if you can see that picture well enough, there's also that lighter blue on the tops of the trees to that corner, and so that's one I'm emulating there. And I will add a little bit more phthalo blue right now to that mixture. That way I can see that it's darker and make a transition in the sky with that color. Now I must admit, as I look at this painting after the fact, as I do this voiceover, I think I wish I would have put more of the lighter blue in further up on that panel, so that I would end with just a little bit more phthalo blue near the top, and not try to put in the ultramarine blue. But that's not the decision I made, and I don't think that the painting is bad for it, but it's just an observation of, and you will do this over time as you're painting as well, and this is an important time to do that, is to study what you've done and see if you note things that you wish you would have tried after the fact, so that the next time you have a painting session, you might try something a little different. I mean, after all, any of these paintings is just, I treat all the paintings I create as if they were studies. That way, no painting is that special. So if it doesn't turn out, I don't have the pressure of thinking, oh gosh, I used my most expensive panel for this, or I was hoping that this one would be an award winner, for a contest. Or no, don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. Just paint the best you can, and paint it as if it's a study. And what I find is that will be some of your best paintings, because then you can loosen up. Your brush strokes are more automatic. You're not trying to go in there and fiddle with the shapes as much. And by the time you're done, you will receive more comments about the fact that this looks like an artist who has more confidence. This looks like an artist who was putting down strokes and leaving them alone. This looks like an artist that they had a vision for the composition. This looks like an artist that was so confident in their brushwork that they did not feel the need to go back in and attempt to move a bunch of paint around all the time. Whereas when I've tried to really create a masterpiece, I can tell you it always fails. Always. Too much pressure on me. So, for what it's worth, I would advise you in the same way. We're reaching about the middle point, so I wanted to remind you again, if you like the content of these videos, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. That way when I release something new, you will be one of the first ones to know about it. By all means, you can make suggestions, comments. Obviously, I don't appreciate folks that come in and all they want to do is criticize. I'm not going to put up with much of that. And if you happen to do your own YouTube channel or are thinking about doing one and posting your own videos, I would suggest that you don't feel bad about that. There are lots of folks that are on the internet that just want to ruin your day, who get no other pleasure than to make fun of your artwork or suggest that you are somehow not good enough to post your work. Don't listen to those voices. The only way that you're going to get any better is by practice. And or take this philosophy. One of the reasons I started this YouTube channel was not to make a bunch of money. It's not to sell a bunch of paintings. It was really for me the opportunity to share my creative journey with others, and as a motivational tool to keep me painting. This gives me a video record of, hopefully, and I do preface that, hopefully, my improvement along the journey. Maybe my own family members, my grandkids, somebody might find it interesting to be able to watch these at some later date when I'm long gone, or maybe folks that have purchased some of these paintings. They can go to YouTube and actually see me as an artist creating the work that they have purchased and hung on their wall. So in that regards, I think it's a mixed media is how I would describe my paintings. Is that if you buy one that I've done a video on, to me that's mixed media. You have the opportunity not just to enjoy the painting that was the product of that creative journey, but you get to see the painting come to life with each stroke that I'm putting down in one of the videos. And I think that's kind of neat. I think that's kind of unique. And one of the reasons why people buy original art is so that it reflects something original. This is not a mass-produced image. This iPad photo I took myself at the Klondike Park outside of Augusta, Missouri. This is the little road that takes you to a cliff that that overlooks the Missouri, yeah, I guess it's the Missouri River. So, and it's also one of the reasons why, at this part of my life, now hopefully I don't change my mind on this, but I don't sell reprints or somehow copies, right, of my paintings. If you want a painting, you have to buy an original from me. And why do I do that? Because to me, that gives every artist the opportunity to sell. Now, I'm not saying that tons of people are going to rush out and buy all of my reprints, but what I am saying is that there are enough artists out there doing original work that deserve your attention and your patronage. By purchasing their paintings, you are not just getting a handcrafted item like a painting or a piece of sculpture or something of that nature. You are also providing resources for these creative minds to continue to do their work and hopefully to bring some beauty into other people's lives. And when we get to that topic, the other thing to keep in mind is that everybody is at different levels. Now, some people may have amazing dreams of selling their artwork for thousands and thousands of dollars at the top galleries around the country, but not everyone is going to make it to that level, obviously. But there are quite a few folks, I think, who would not mind having an original piece of art in their home. They just don't want to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for it. Well, there's plenty of really good artists who are selling paintings at reasonable prices. Now, if reasonable to you is bargain basement, what you would pay for some kind of reproduction at Walmart, no, I'm not meaning that. But most folks can afford some original artwork somewhere in your home without having to pay thousands and thousands of dollars for it. So there you just saw me go into the ultramarine blue and put that at the top, and I've blended the two together a little bit, as well as the horizontal line blue closest to the horizon line. Now I'm creating a mixture here of brown, and instead of going to my burnt sienna, I've just used the paint that was already on the palette, which was some blue, and now I'm mixing the other two primaries. And by mixing three primaries together, a red, a blue, and a yellow, you will get brown. And then I'm putting a touch of titanium white in there to get it lighter. And this is going to be the color that I'm going to use for this little path leading back. And notice I'm also trying to remind myself here to paint with bold brush strokes. I'm not going back in and fiddling with this. I'm going to lay it down once, a little bit thicker paint this time, and leave it alone. I'm lengthening my strokes as I get closer to the viewer. This should also help give a sense of depth as well, just by creating this with the brush strokes. Notice how the painting is starting also to come to life as most of the orange is covered up. And yet, there's a certain sense of vibration, I do believe, coming from the underpainting. There are little bitty holes on any canvas. And so there's a little bit of that orange showing through, even though I haven't intentionally allowed a lot of that to show through necessarily. There's just enough to give it a sense of what your eye needs when it sees a bunch of green like this is some red. And of course, orange, very close to red, right? And so that's reading into this painting. And here, at this stage in the painting, you should be able to see the big masses. These are not trees. This is really not a road. I'm looking at the colors and the big shapes. Now I've completely covered the canvas. And then my focus turns to this third layer, if you will, that's going on now, which is going to be correcting some of the shapes and adding some what we might call details. So I'm taking this brown that's on the palette now, and I'm noticing that there's other places where this color would be useful. In some of this greenery that we have towards the trees, the bushes and such, I'm lightening some of that up with some strokes over top. So this is actually a fairly thick paint that I'm applying right now to create that illusion. And I'm also covering some of the orange that was on the right of the panel. You may notice that I don't know why I started doing this, but sometimes I will tap the color onto the panel. Over here, I'm noticing that I've got some areas where it's just a lot of green. So I'm putting a little bit of this brown into the mixture to give a sense. I don't want you to focus there, so it needs to be very abstract. But I'm putting a few colors of this brown, a few strokes into the foreground to give you a sense that there's some grasses here at the very front. Since I already identified the focal point and some of the biggest details are going to go back down that road where we see the contrast that's drawing the eye in the photo of the darks and the lights. And while I'm calling attention to that, see how even though obviously my darkest greens at this point are not as dark as that photo, it's still dark enough. It's still pulling the eye back there. So you can envision multiple paintings on this scene in which you could go darker with your greens, you could go even a little bit lighter than what I've got, and still produce an interesting painting just by varying the tonal values. So that's why we say that tonal values are really the most crucial element in any painting. Now here, at this point, when we talk about highlights or layers, there you notice even in the photo reference, there are some trees on either side that they have a lot of yellow in the green. So I'm coming in over top with, this is still a fairly big brush. I think this is a number 4, Hall Bristle Flat. And just putting little bitty strokes to indicate some leaves here. So I want to get, because that's the sense that I get from the photo and what I got when I was standing there. I wanted to give the sense that some of those darker greens I want to pop out from it. But I clearly want the viewer to sense that this tree is much closer to them. And one way that you can do that is with the contrast of colors. So value-wise, if you squint, this is not a major value change. But the color hue is playing a little bit of a trick on the eye and suggesting, oh, it's bad, just like the photo has given me that idea, because there's that big contrast between those trees up front and what's in the back. But I could still use that to create contrast in this painting, even though I'm not going as dark. And then, yes, you see the spot on the tree that's a little bit further back. I want to give a sense that there's kind of a sunspot there. And there it's I don't want to give the illusion that those are individual leaves, because that will pop out towards the viewer even more so. So what I'm actually trying to do is, with the same doggone color, I want those brush strokes to be very gentle so that you can't distinguish anything. You know that there's light hitting it, but but no detail. Then over here, I'm coming in a pretty strong way, using the oranges and the greens that are already on there, and just coming over top of that with this yellow. And in fact, I'm going to make the yellow more dramatic on these trees. And like I said, these were not very impressive trees. They didn't have many leaves on them. In fact, there was more branches than leaves, as you can see. And so I want to give it this side of the painting a little bit more strength. That's not the focal point, but it deserves a few highlights to keep the viewer engaged in the scene. And then anywhere I see that sun, I want to highlight it. Now, right now, I think the painting is taking shape. So, in other words, when I was painting it, I had the same feeling that it looks like this is working. That the two ends of the painting are helping to focus the viewer down the path. Now, how do you know when to stop with some of this? I don't know what to tell you, other than it just takes painting after painting after painting. I even wonder that myself as I look at this process again. Did I go overboard? Did I paint too much yellow in this area? So I have the same doubts that some others have. So if you've struggled with that and you've gotten to this point in the painting process and you're like, oh man, did I go overboard? Am I obliterating what I did underneath this? You're not alone. And many paintings will be lost because of that. But over time, you will begin to make better decisions on the basis of the results that you have seen. And then you will become more intuitive about how much you are doing. Now here, I'm making the dark mixture up. This is the Madder Lake with ultramarine blue to create a dark purple. And here's the liner brush. This is the Aspen liner brush from Princeton makes it. And this is the stage in which I'm going to start putting in my branches and trunks. And I usually start from the bottom because, why do I do that? Because there's more paint on the brush at that time. And as I go upwards, there'll be less paint on the brush, right? And that mimics what happens in nature. As your branches go up, they get a little bit thinner. And of course, I don't want just two objects together. You always want to make sure it's an odd number. So I'm making sure that there's at least 3 of these trunks that you can see back there. Which function, I know that looks like it's almost in the center of the painting. But once again, I want to lead you up that path, and I need something else to show you some interest. To get you to say, hey, that's kind of interesting. Look at all those trees there. And that they're different than the foreground trees, where we don't have as much of that detail, because I don't want your focus to be there. I'm going to put some branches there, but it's not going to be the focal point. I want to go back down to that path. There are some that are hinted at in this section now. So what I'm trying to do there is just go in and not too careful. I'm not trying to be too careful about this, and get the sense that there's some branches, some trunks of trees that are growing in that space. But I don't want a lot of detail necessarily there, because I also want to present to you that there's some depth going on. That these trees that I'm painting here are actually deeper than those 3 that I put almost in the center of the painting. Then we got this big tree section over here. And so notice that my first branch, where did I go with it? I had that branch growing towards the inside of the painting to help the composition so that you will stay in a kind of circular pattern or an O-shaped composition pattern in the middle of the canvas. So I want the majority of the branches that I'm painting now need to get the eye going in that direction. I don't want them going off to the right, because then that'll take your eye right off the canvas. And notice here, there are times in which I lighten up or I stop. So that way, because some of what I've already put down, those are the leaf formations. Yeah, they look like abstract colors, but they are the shapes of the leaves. I'm not going to sit here and paint every single leaf. So what do branches do? Well, sometimes you see the branch, and sometimes the branch is hidden by the grouping of leaves. So when you see a section where you've painted a lot of yellow or some other colors there, you don't want to necessarily disturb all of that. So you just take your little liner brush and you pull the paint up, and then you stop. Then go get some paint and repeat the process again somewhere else, so that it creates this kind of mystery of where those branches are. There's some hidden and there's some showing. That will help. And of course, too, you want to remember that these branches in nature, they go all over the place. So don't try to be too precious with the design. You can see here where I've actually made some shapes that if I was consciously thinking about how a branch looks, they might not look like this. So I want to create a sort of randomness that you have in nature. And once again, we're going to put some up here. And of course, don't be afraid to use the corners and the edges of your paintings. Trees don't grow to just about the top of your canvas. You need to make sure, almost in every landscape painting I ever do, I have at least one tree that goes off the canvas. Notice here, the trees coming in from the side, you don't see all of them. You see portions of them to give you the sense that the scene is much bigger than this canvas. And then the tops of these trees on each side of the painting are actually going off the canvas. So you see one branch that I already took off of the right and on the left. So we're getting there. The photo reference also has some clouds, and I'm going to try to deal with the clouds here soon. So you may see that in a minute or two. Right now, just focusing on a few little details. Obviously, as the branches move up the tree, they become smaller, and some of those branches don't have any leaves on them. But just want to give a sense that by adding a few of those, it creates for the viewer a sense of, wow, there's a lot of detail here. When in fact, it's not a lot of detail. It's just the suggestion of a few trees. So that way, the viewer's mind begins filling in a lot of the other portions of this painting. In fact, always remember that you want to give your viewer, I think, an act to play in your painting. In other words, if you paint, I guess I would call myself a critic of super realism. Now, I've enjoyed seeing some paintings which look like photographs, and it's like, wow, how did this artist do it? But for me personally, I'm really drawn by paintings that leave a lot to the viewer and allow the viewer to enter into this plane, this world, and have them fill out the rest of the details. This is what I think really separated the Impressionists from everyone else at the time that they were painting, is the Impressionists understood this principle that when the eye is focused on the scene, you really are only looking at a small portion of all the landscape. So everything else is an impression of the landscape. You want the focus to be one little area where we put the most detail, and then allow the viewer to do the rest of the work. In other words, in this painting right now, you can see where the abstract shapes of the green, did I paint leaves? Did I paint foliage? Did I paint individual trees? No, it's just shapes. But you as a viewer can sense those are trees. They have to be trees. They're like this. Now, what helps us to make that leap is that we have one or two more well-defined trees in the scene, the ones that we want the viewer to focus on. And sometimes we might add some focus like it did in this painting, so that there's some areas of more detail, so that I kind of lead you in to the painting and give you some details to look at. Give it a little bit more interest. But I certainly don't want you bouncing back and forth all over the place. I want you to kind of make a path here with your eyes and seeing what I'm putting down. And notice where we are time-wise. This is only 45 minutes. And I hope that I'm conveying a sense as I'm painting this. I'm not trying to be overly involved in little bitty details. Everything else now has been big shapes. And I'm only pulling out this liner brush near the very end of this process. And by the way, you may be wondering, well, what is the consistency of this dark color that you're putting over top? I would say it's the consistency of ink. It is running a little bit more from the paintbrush. I want to be able to get it off of my paintbrush. And if you're going too thick, well, number one, it can make some unsightly strokes that become a problem for how to deal with later. So I would suggest that you get it to the point where it is a thick ink. It's not, you don't want it to run. You don't want to have runs at this point on your painting canvas. But you do want it to easily come off of that brush and stay put where it is. And of course, once again, the only way that you're going to master that is by doing it yourself. Be fearless. When the palette seems to suggest, or you could even use that as a trial run, right? Make up a consistency that you think will not run, and then do a little trunk right there on your palette. And if it stays put, well, there's a good chance it's going to stay put on the actual painting. And then move to the painting and put it up there. And do it with confidence. You don't want to go back in there and mess around with any of these branches. So, for example, I keep telling myself, oh man, this branch didn't turn out exactly how I had envisioned it in my head. But I certainly don't want to ruin the painting. And one way to ruin the painting is to go back in too much and attempt to do too many adjustments. Just trust that people are going to see this and not have the same kind of anxiety that you do about it looking like the scene in front of you. We're past that at this point. Even though the photo reference is now still there, I'm really just thinking about what will make this painting look better. So now I discovered that I want certain sections to be darker. And so I've mixed up a kind of darkish brown purple here to stand in for my darkest darks. And I am still using, let's see, I think this is actually a number 2 round. Yes, that's a number 2 round. It's made by Princeton. It's the Aspen line as well. And so I grabbed that as a secondary brush for my assortment of brushes. And I'm putting down some other little strokes to hopefully suggest those darker shades, the shades being made and cast on the ground by the trees. And I'm also introducing some novelty because I've been using flat brushes, predominantly larger brushes. So there'll be another contrast when you see the painting or to look at it up close. You will see some of these smaller brush strokes producing these shadows. That's another way to provide some texture and some points of interest. Now I'm also taking that line all the way down to the foreground here, like it is in the painting, which really, once again, I think emphasizes the contrast of going up of that little climb, that trailhead, to where we got the lightest light and the darkest dark, with the sky poking its way through at the very top of this hill. Then it's always good to use the same color in various places around the painting that provide some color harmony. And so I'm putting a few darks in the foliage area over here by this tree. Getting close to the end of the painting process now, and I'll be signing the painting here soon. So one last time, I hope I'm not a broken record, but if you've enjoyed the content, hopefully you've maybe learned a couple of things from it. I'd always like to know if you learned something from it, and are you watching till the end of the video. Maybe drop a comment about that and give a thumbs up. And of course, if you have not subscribed, please do. It's always interesting to me that so many folks watch these, but they have not subscribed. So something like 60% of you have not subscribed, even though you're watching most of my videos. So you did see I took actually a dry brush and took some of the path color and just made a very confident, bold stroke to suggest a kind of narrowing of that path, which to me, that was the one stroke that really finished the painting off. Now here is where, once again, life is about making decisions. I decided to drop in some clouds. I almost wish I had just stopped right about here. And I think that would have been enough. But I pushed forward. Maybe it makes the painting stronger. I don't know. If I had it to do over, I probably wouldn't put so many cloud strokes in. Just me, though. Now, hopefully, viewers will think that that was a good thing that I put in there. Some sense of clouds. As you see in the reference photo, there were quite a few clouds, especially this big kind of massive clouds right behind this tree where it kind of makes sense. And that's, I think, why I ended up putting the clouds, is that we have this shadow, right, being created with the trees, but part of that shadow is actually being created by the cloud overhead, this massive cloud over here, creating some of the contrast in the colors. And so, to me, I thought, it seems like that cloud is essential to be in the painting, so that you understand why there might be some clouds. Otherwise, we might imagine a scene in which almost all of that is very light with very few darks. So I'm just about wrapping up this cloud shape. I'm painting into the tree, and that's one nice thing about oils, right? You can kind of shift and push and pull edges and so forth, because you can just do that by applying thicker paint. So this is pretty thick titanium white paint. A little bit of what do you call it? The gam gel. This is the type of gel that makes it dry a little quicker. The Galkid, I'm sorry. For some reason, I can never remember the name of that gel. Oh, you're wondering about why I'm placing those brushes. They're hanging there. I've actually got a little bag that holds them there, and I just clip it with a stationary clip. So I've signed the painting, and thanks again for joining us for this painting. I'll be back in the next video. You have a great day now.